Well, it is a huge honor to be here today with actually my dentist. You've been my dentist. When did you start doing my dentistry? That was was that 20 years ago when I went out there with
I
my
think it
dental
might have
assistant
been,
Jan or whatever?
1995 maybe.
So I'm telling you, if you're a dentist and you want to know who my dentist is, and you want to have your dentist, and remember David Hornbrook. When he's teaching dentists, he's davidhornbrook.com. But if you want him to be your personal dentist in San Diego, you get a rockin' hot vacation at, what is it, the lamp site district, or
The gas lamp quarter.
the gas lamp quarter? I love that place. I love that
I love it
hotel Colorado or hotel Coronado.
Coronado.
The Coronado Hotel. Well, you're a local,
Hotel, yeah.
so you never stay
Yeah,
at
I
a
live-
hotel. People are
Yeah,
always
no, I live-
asking.
Yeah, I live right downtown. I live in the gas lamp district,
Really?
right at the ballpark. So if people want to email me privately, they can email me at david@hornbrook.com. And if they're coming over here, I'll tell them where to stay because, living downtown, I live right downtown for the last 15 years. I go out every night and I know all the good places to eat and all the good places to stay. So it's changing and it's only becoming cooler.
Well, that is cool. I love that. Hotel Coronado?
Hey, it's actually Hotel Del Coronado.
Hotel Del. I love that place. What do you think of that
Yeah.
place?
It's awesome. Do you know that was built in the early 1900s without blueprints? Literally, some architect just said, "Let's build something over there," and the builder built it. And they said, "Let's do something here," and the builder built it. And so it's got an amazing history.
Well, what I like about that place is, when you have 4 kids, a lot of these upscale resorts they don't want your business. And I always took my 4 boys there, and extremely kid friendly in the breakfast section. It's very pro family. So if you're going there with 4 kids and a grandkid and whatever, it's all good stuff. But hey, David, obviously you're when any dentist on Dental Town or any dentist I talk to talks about cosmetic dentistry, you're always the first name that comes up. I can't think of a bigger name, a bigger brand name in cosmetic dentistry. I mean, there's some big names out there, but you're the biggest name. But I want to start this interview in a totally different way. I've always been in Phoenix, Arizona. A quarter of my practice, they don't even speak Spanish. I'm right across the street from Guadalupe Indian Reservation, all cash. But I want to ask you, since you're the guru of cosmetics, I want to throw you under a bus for one question and see what your response is. Okay. It seems to me when I got out of school, most fillings were amalgam, and amalgam seems to be more bacterial. I mean, if someone asks me what I do for a living, I don't really say I'm a dentist. I mean, I really, a firefighter fights fire. And a policeman fights bad guys. And I fight gram-negative anaerobes. And for 27 years, I've been fighting Streptococcus mutans and P. gingivalis. That's basically 99% of what I do. And it seems like back in the day in 87, when everything was an amalgam, a lot of people say it's not the mercury that's half, it's not the silver, zinc, copper, but it's actually the tin ions flying out that's antibacterial. And it just seems like those fillings were antibacterial and fought off that Streptococcus mutans forever. And then we entered the go-go years, the Cosmetic Revolution. You were in the forefront of that. I mean, you were Pac Live, LVI. I mean, you couldn't throw a cat without you lecturing somewhere on cosmetic. And the whole world went helium molar and Ivoclar and Empress, and now it's Cerac and CAD-CAM. But I always wonder, it seems like now, 27 years later, it seems like restorations last shorter. It seems like the fastest growing disease on planet Earth is dental decay. And the top 3 are dental decay, obesity, and diabetes. This year was morbid for me because this year, America, for the first time, consumed over 51% of its calories by drinking. We have a government that subsidizes high fructose corn syrup. So when you go to McDonald's, a Coke is cheaper than bottled water when everybody's fat with dental decay and obesity and diabetes. This year was also morbid for me because I met the first pediatric dentist this year in Hong Kong, Kathmandu, Nepal, and New Delhi. And all the older dentists were telling me when they got out of school 25 years ago, that no kid under 5 had a cavity. And now in Asia and Africa, you tell me the age of the kid, that's how many cavities he has, because they've all switched from drinking water to Coke and Pepsi. And right now, the filling of choice is an inert plastic composite. I was wondering, in your amazing mind, do you see an active ingredient coming up in the future? I mean, are you hearing any scientists saying, yeah, in the next 5 years, helium oil or Empress or a ceramics is going to have an ingredient in there that leaches out? The Japanese, don't they seem to be more favoring glass ionomers that leach calcium and fluoride and phosphorus as opposed to just inert plastic composite? What are your thoughts on dental decay?
That's an interesting way to start this interview. Whether it's bacterial static, the amalgam versus, what we see with our resins. I think anything we place is going to be a little bit of a compromise, and what compromise can we live with? To answer your last question, Japan is typically resin-based. You look at New Zealand and Australia where they do like glass ionomers, they do like resin ionomers. And their thought process is that, it does leach out the calcium and the fluoride. Is that going to remineralize? And again, there's still controversy on whether that's really happening or whether it's antibacterial. And, you can look at these two restorations, an amalgam and a composite. You can look at the compromises, the pros and the cons. And even if I was to say amalgam is bacterial static, which I don't know whether I'd really say that, it's still a compromise. They leak. They're certainly not self-sealing like in the old zinc days. I think all your listeners, if they've been in practice long enough, almost every amalgam they've taken out has had decay underneath it. And so even if it was slightly bacterial static, the fact that the surface is rough, the seal is not there, the bacteria have a place to accumulate and colonize. I think that's a huge compromise. Where the composite, the advantage to me is it's a much better sealing restoration if done properly. And that's the other side of the coin is, you could take a composite. If it's not done properly, I think it's an inferior restoration to amalgam. If it's done properly, I think it's a superior restoration. It is sealing. It's an instant seal. We also have the ability to see decay. I just took off 3 crowns because, we had this conversation before we went on air about, I still practice dentistry. I practice 4 long days a week. I'm doing more dentistry now than probably in my 28 years of practice. I no longer have an associate, and, we have a general practice that does everything. I took off 3 crowns a day, and they are PFMs. And, there was just a catch on the margin, and there was a little bit of gingival migration, so they were anesthetic. We take it off, and there's this black rim right around the margin where there's micro leakage. And those should have been replaced probably a year ago or 2 years or 5 years ago, but they weren't because we didn't see that. So I look at tooth color restorations and I think, if I've got a composite that's starting to leak or starting to get recurrent decay, I have the ability to go in and repair that restoration or get to it before it becomes catastrophic. I mean, you know better than anyone. I've heard you say, an amalgam is a baby crown. Every amalgam wants to grow up and be a crown someday. When they fail, it's typically catastrophic because we don't see microleakage and we don't see stain or failure until a cusp breaks off. Where I think tooth color dentistry, we have that option of being able to see failure before it becomes catastrophic. When we look at longevity of a restoration, I think we're also much harder on tooth color dentistry than metal supported dentistry. If we have a composite and 4 years later we see some darkness around the margin, I mean, we freak out. Or if we put an Empress crown or an Emax crown or an onlay, all of a sudden we get a little stain at the margin, we freak out and we say, oh, look at that restoration, it's a failure. It's because it's a bonded restoration or it's resin instead of metal or glass ionomer. Where in fact, if that was metal based, it probably has that same stain along the margins. You just don't see it. So, again, we could almost throw up all the values of a metal-based restoration, whether it be amalgam, or a tooth-colored restoration, whether it be a composite or porcelain. And the things that landed in our hands that were positive, I just think tooth-colored bonded dentistry, direct or indirect, my hand would be much fuller for all the reasons we just talked about.
Okay. My second question, and then I'll let you take this anywhere you want to go. My second question, David, is this. 5,000 kids are graduating each year as a dentist in America. You and I have been around the block for 25 years plus. We've seen it all. We've seen the fads. We've seen everything. If your boy Phoenix was just walking out of dental school and he had $300,000 student loans, or maybe just got out of dental school in the last 5 or 6 years, because you and I know, we saw some brutal recessions in our lifetime in 1980. We saw another one in 87, but nothing was like that last one in 2008. I mean, it seems like the 80 recession was a punch in the gut, and the 87 was a kick in the crotch. But I think that September 15, 2008, that was a knockout. I mean, I think we all were just knocked out. So there's a lot of dentists out there, Dave, for the last 5 years that are in a town and it's going nowhere. The economy, it's not shrinking, it's not growing, it's just flat, it's malaise. Since you've been out there 25 years, what advice would you give these kids that are in the first 5 years of their journey as they're approaching, and where could they be when they're 25 years down the road, like you and me? What advice would you tell your child?
Well, that's a really great question. Again, I mean, you look at the average debt service that the graduating student today, it's anywhere between $250,000 and $490,000, depending on the school. And it's a lot different than when you and I went to school, or the dentists that are listening went to school 10 years ago. So, they're not going to get out, they're not going to go to Shine or Patterson and say, or Bank of America and say, let me have 500 grand to open a practice. So that's out. So they really have a couple options. One is, corporate dentistry. The DMSOs, they're looking for dentists. And that's why they're doing so well, because they go to these young dentists and they say, listen, you owe 300 grand. We'll pay you $75,000 to $125,000 a year, which is a huge, huge amount of money when you just got out of school. I remember when I got out of school, I paid myself $1,200 a month. I thought I was a millionaire because I'd been a student forever. So now they're going into these DMSOs, these corporate dental organizations, and they're getting an income. They're slowly paying back their loan, but there's no growth potential. 10 years from now, they'd still be making, $25 to $50 a crown. Why the president or the board of the DMOs are buying Learjets in mansions on the countryside. So that would be an option. At least they can start to get faster, get better, maybe get some contacts within the community that they can get out of that corporate type practice. But that's an option. The second is to try to get involved with an older dentist that is still doing well, a fee for service, or maybe insurance based, but not a PPO HMO type service. Get involved and try to help them grow their practice. I had a good conversation with a friend of mine the other day about where do I think dentistry is going. And I think what's going to happen is we're going to lose our middle class. We're going to lose the J.C. Penney's and the Macy's. You look at the Nordstroms, the Ritz-Carltons, the Four Seasons. You look at the Walmarts. Both those are doing really well, and the middle class is going to be screwed. In dentistry, if I'm just a middle of the road dentist that takes some insurance plans, I see a lot of patients. I don't have great customer service. My fees are higher than the corporate dental organization down the road. I think that's a dinosaur that's going to die off. I still think people, and there's everyone in our society, there's people within our society that still are willing to pay out of pocket for great service, where you call them at home after an injection, and you know their name, you know their family, and you're convincing them the value of a better restoration or better dentistry, and they value that quality. That I still think that's going to be really successful. We see that with dental labs, where the dental labs that decide, we're just doing high-end cosmetics, they're doing really well. It's the ones that we're trying to be everything to everyone are getting screwed. And then we see the dental labs as well that are at the bottom that are saying, everything we have is $69. They're doing well, or the Chinese or the Philippine laboratories. So I think we're going to see dentists at the top are going to do really well because they offer a service that the DMOs cannot, but it's going to cost the patient more. And then we're going to see that low end, I'm not going to say quality wise, but low end fees that the corporate dental organizations have. They're going to do well because as the economy changes, people are looking for low cost dentistry. So my advice, if my sons, and they do not want to go into dentistry, by the way, is probably to to start with one of these corporate dental organizations, which again, I hate to say that, to get faster, quicker, and to meet contacts, and then try to find someone in the community you want to practice that is slowly phasing out, that has the type of practice that they want to practice.
And define your practice, hornbrook.com. Define your practice in the gas lamp district of San Diego. What?
Well, my practice is a fee-for-service practice, and it's we're a very high service based practice. We're not a dental spa where we massage your hands and paint your toenails during the dental visit, but we certainly treat you special. I see one patient at a time. They're treated as if they're my only patient that all day, even if they're not. And so we're primarily, it's internal referrals because people like the interaction. And that would be my practice. And, my practice is not, Manhattan or Beverly Hills practice. I still do a single DO composite or a single crown, but we do a lot of big case dentistry. And this isn't on the rich and famous. This is a person down the street that takes out a loan with Springstone or tries to get some equity out of their home. I mean, these are just average people that I've created value for quality dentistry as well as aesthetic dentistry or beautiful smile. So, I know it can be done because it's being done in my practice. And I'm not any better dentist than your listeners or you. It's just we've tried to create that atmosphere that, you're going to pay a little bit more out of pocket. We'll help you with your insurance. We'll send photos. We'll send letters. We'll give you the stamped envelope. But we're not going to take your $25 for a restoration like some of those other organizations.
And you're still actively teaching this amazing dentistry. I mean, I've seen your own shows. You're doing it. You have your own group, the David Hornbrook Group. And then you're also doing it with my very good buddy and everybody's favorite guy on Dental Town, Sean Keating, who's got to have more personality than probably the next 1,000 dentists combined. You're doing courses with Sean Keating up in Irvine over the shoulder.
Yeah, we're doing some really fun things. And, I had never worked with Sean before, and I've known him a little bit throughout the years, kind of passing in the night. And we've done one program about a month ago, and we're doing one in 2 weeks in Irvine. And I'm really enjoying him. Like you said, he's bigger than life. We went out for dinner, and he said, I feel like lobster, I feel like steak, so I'm going to order one of each instead of just the surf and turf. And it's, that's the way he lives. He's huge, and not huge that way, bigger than life. And I've really enjoyed his personality. And these courses have been really fun. It's 2 days, and we try to make it really affordable because the economics of these young dentists who come out and they want to learn cosmetics because they're still not teaching in dental schools, not the way they should be. Or you look at these dentists where their incomes have gone down and they're not going to be able to afford an $8,000 2-week course like we used to do when I ran LVI or Pac Live. So we're making it very, very affordable. They spend 2 days with me. There's some lecture, but I actually prep a case. I provisionalize a case. We go out for dinner that night, and then I seat the case the next day. And so we're limiting to 12 to 15 docs, and they get a lot of, I'll say, me time, just because they get to spend time right there. And we're having a really good time with that. Then in San Diego, I'm working with Mark Montgomery, who Mark and I taught for
25 years.
Yeah, about 15 years. We took 4 years off, and he's just awesome. For those that haven't ever seen Mark Montgomery speak, if you get a chance to, make sure you do. And he and I are doing a 3-part series on what I call functional aesthetics. Aesthetic dentistry, but everything is functional based, from splint therapy to taking the correct bite to equilibration to mounting the case, pain control, smile design, everything. And we're doing that in San Diego, and hands-on, very, very affordable. And we're having a lot of fun, really a lot of fun.
So, David, it's kind of funny because when I was a senior in dental school in 1987, my prosthodontic teacher told us that there would be no labs within 3 years because the French were building CEREC, and it was CEREC 1. And I was so excited I got that thing, and it was horrible. And then like 5 years later, they told me, no, CEREC 2. So I bought that. It was horrible. CEREC 3 was horrible. And then finally, CEREC 3, what was it? Blue Cam?
The 3, and then the 3D, the red cam came out.
Yeah.
Cam with the 3D.
But it was the upgraded CEREC 3 that then the market said, okay, it's ready now. It's ready for prime time. It was about a 25-year development for the French before it really got here. But now it's the real deal as far as market share. I mean, they've sold, thousands of units. Some say 12,000 American dentists have one. It's hard to get hard numbers. But Tell me your thoughts on CEREC and because you've obviously, I mean, when you got out of school, it wasn't a revolution. I mean, what would you say CEREC really became a revolution? I mean, you got out of school in 86. What year do you think it was? 2000 or later than that?
That it became a revolution? No,
Yeah, no,
I'd say less than 5 years. Less than 5 years ago.
Yeah. So you saw dentistry 20 years without it, and now you've been seeing it like a steam engine rolling down the tracks for 5 years. Just what are your thoughts from sitting on the moon, looking at the Cosmetic Revolution and the CEREC thing?
Well, what I look at is there was two things that were limiting its use and its widespread acceptance. One was the technology itself. The mill was crummy, the camera was crummy, and so you really couldn't get a good restoration that fit and looked good. So that was the technology. Second was a limitation of materials. You know, we didn't have the ability to use Empress initially. We were limited to basically the Sorona material and Vita Mark II. And it's like, you know, if you like those, then maybe that's kind of a good thing. But if you don't like those, then why would you spend $100,000 on this technology that was mediocre? So they improved technology, the Blue Cam and now the OmniCam, and the cameras there. The software is much more intuitive. You know, if you think about, because I went through that evolution as well, CEREC 1, CEREC 2, CEREC 3. I mean, it was
Did you buy all those too?
Yeah, I didn't buy them, but I was involved in the research of that and working with them. But it was I always say things should have a short and steep learning curve, a long and shallow learning curve, where the CEREC was a long and steep learning curve, and it was so non-intuitive. And I think the software now is more intuitive. At least now it looks like a tooth. You know, you pull a tooth on and it looks like a tooth as you draw it. So technology definitely improved and made it easier. Second is now the materials. You look at CEREC and you're not limited by materials anymore. You know, we're using Emax. And I think Emax is what made CEREC a major player, something that dentists should look at. Because, you know, we were doing these monolithic lithium disilicate Emax restorations from the laboratory, where all they would do is wax it, sprue it, press it, stain it, and they would charge us $200. And now with CEREC, it's like, wait a minute, what does CEREC do? Let's see, we scan it, we mill it, it's monolithic, and we paint it with a little bit of stain. As long as we're halfway decent at that, we have the exact same restoration, and it costs us $35. And the fact that, like in my practice, we do a lot of monolithic Emax in the posterior, lithium disilicate.
Now, are you using CEREC for that or a lab?
I use a lab primarily now. You know, I think CEREC still is limited in the anatomy. You know, I find myself that I don't think the accuracy of the margins is a problem. You know, some people say, oh, it doesn't fit. Well, if it doesn't fit, that's operator error. That's not the technology, it's not the material. Again, there's good studies on that, so I don't think that's the problem. I think the limitation is a little bit, it's a 2-axis milling machine. I mean, you have 2 burrs. You know, you get this restoration back. And have you used the CEREC?
Yeah, we use a lot. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
So,
I make 2 or 3 a day.
Okay, so you look at the anatomy of that versus something you get from the laboratory, and in my opinion, it's not comparable. So I would go ahead and mill my Emax, and I would spend the next half hour putting tertiary anatomy in it, and then I would, put it in the furnace. So, I found that in order to get the dentistry that I wanted to do, that the limitation was I didn't have the time to sit there and grind a bunch of anatomy in it. But, that's me. But I think it is definitely a serviceable restoration. I think there's not a compromise, where I think in the past it was a huge compromise. You look at these CEREC restorations, and I've had the benefit of having Rich Masick, half mile down the street from me, and he was one of the pioneers.
He's in San Diego. Wasn't he originally East Coast, like New Hampshire, Connecticut?
I don't know. He's been in San Diego, right down the street from me.
The kid with the ponytail?
No, I don't think Rich has a ponytail.
Didn't he have a ponytail 25 years ago?
I don't know.
Huh.
That's a very good question. He doesn't anymore.
Can I stop and ask you one question on the prep?
Yeah.
To me, it seems like when we got out of school 25 years ago and did Crown and Bridge, you could do a lot of errors on the prep, and the lab man could fix a lot of stuff, dice spacing, reduction copings, all that stuff. But it seems to me when dentists say that the CEREC doesn't fit or the margins aren't great, You have to make a much better prep. I mean, I've noticed on when getting into CEREC that, I mean, end cuttings, finishing burrs, and smoothing, and it's almost like to nail a CEREC. I mean, it seems like when I was using like Keating Lab, I could prep that thing in 5 minutes and impress. But now that you're doing a CEREC crown, it's a 10-minute prep, and it looks like you're getting it ready to have its picture taken. Would you say that's true? I mean, to get a really good fit, the prep has to be a lot nicer, smoother, no undercuts, finishing burrs,
Oh, absolutely. There's two factors about that, Howard. One is you do see your prep bigger than life. As you mentioned, Keating, you send your prep to Keating. I mean, it could look like you took a chainsaw to it. What they're going to do is fill all that with die space.
Right.
They're going to make a perfect margin that the restoration fits. And you say, wow, I'm a good dentist. With CEREC, you're going to see your stuff up on the screen, and you're going to see that what you thought was smooth now looks like there's a bunch of volcanoes or the surface of the moon on that. Second is tissue isolation, a margin isolation. Again, if you take an impression and the margin's not there, the laboratory will make a margin. They'll make it, and you'll get it back, and you'll say, wow, look at this great margination I got. Where CEREC, if you don't get great tissue control and margin isolation, you're screwed. And so I think it does make you a better dentist. And, I saw that right from the beginning when I thought, well, this is a nice prep, nice and smooth, because, you see my preps. I use a finishing burr on all my margins, and I actually polish my prep. And I thought this was a great looking prep. I put it up on the CEREC machine. It's like, holy crap, that looks like crap. So you're absolutely right.
So David, on that note, what do you say to all these young kids in dental school that say, yeah, Howard recommends those, he wears those 3.5 or 4.5 loops because he's a 52-year-old man, but I'm only 25 years old and I don't need that. But then when you see your prep on that CEREC screen, that's probably what, 40x, would you believe? I mean, I have no idea how big that is. 40. I mean, you have this perfect prep, and you look at a 40x, you're like, I'm an idiot. I shouldn't be allowed to do dentistry. And you're back in there cleaning it and finishing it. What do you say to the dental graduates who don't think they need loops because they're only 25?
Well, I think loops are absolutely mandatory. I mean, for you and I, we need them because we couldn't tell a tooth from a toe. If we took off our loops right now. Occasionally I get caught where I think it's the end of my day, and I take off my loops, and my hygienist calls me and says, "Can you just check this one crown? I think it's leaking." And I think, do I really need to go and put back on my loops with the light and all that? And I say no, and I go in there, and I can't even see if the patient even has a tooth there, But I think that as dental students, there's two things as a start for them is right away they see 2 to 2.5 times magnification of their restorations, of their preps, of decay, of disease and success. I think that's a huge benefit. Second is I think it's going to start them on a road to better posture. I didn't wear loops, and I was hunched over, and now it's hard to break that mold even though I wear 3.5 power loops now. So I highly suggest loops, and most of the dental schools now are actually including them in the dental kit, which is very, very cool. And I just think it's so important. I
think one of the best.
I had a microscope in my practice for a little bit, and all of a sudden you're enlarging these things 20 times. I didn't want to see my preps at 22 power. I don't care how good of a dentist that I think I might be. I don't want to see my margins at 20 power.
I think one of the best moves I made in the last 5 years is buying them for all the hygienists and assistants. I mean, you can't you can't knock your assistant for making it temporary with naked eye. I mean, my assistant Jan, you met her several times. She's the same age as I am. I bought them all loops, and now the problem is if someone's breaks their loop or something happens to their loop, they feel like they can't see patients.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's a problem.
I have a hygienist that won't see a patient if there's something wrong with their loops, and 3 years ago they never had them. That's amazing.
Yeah, and my assistants and hygienists use their loops as well. And, that's the kind of a funny dilemma you just mentioned because, when I travel around the country with the Hornbrook group, we did these live patient courses at 13 universities across the country. Every once in a while, I would check my loops and the bag didn't come. And I had to cancel my patients that day because I couldn't prep or I couldn't do any dentistry without loops. So I ended up having to buy a second pair just to keep in my office all the time in case that happened. And you're right, magnification, anything that's going to make us a better dentist. The smoother the preps, the better the margins, the better the lab work, and the longer lasting that restoration is going to be.
The first impact you had on me, where I knew this guy was a freak at another level. I remember. I no, I'm serious. I remember the first time I heard you lecture. I don't know. It was I think it was in the late '80s, like maybe '89 or something like that. And some guy asked you a question about one bonding agent versus another, and you went through every flipping ingredient in each one of the bonding agents. And I just said, I was sitting there with Mike Detola, and we looked at each other and we rolled our eyes like, oh my God. So since you've known everything about every ingredient of every bonding agent, tell me about adhesive dentistry and if the hype with these universal adhesives is really all that it's made out to be. And I mean, I don't know anybody that's thought more about bonding agents for 25 years than you. What's the state of bonding agents? What do you recommend? Give us a brand name. Is one step all that it is? Go through that for us if you don't mind.
Well, I think, I'm going to very quickly go over the generations. We started with the fourth generation. Those are the three-part systems. And, that changed dentistry forever. All of a sudden we could bond a dent. And the rules for us as restorative dentists changed in the late 80s with fourth generation.
Okay,
That's when we
but for the kids that just coming out, tell them the three parts.
Okay, so that was phosphoric acid. We etched the dentin, we rinsed, we left it wet. Then we followed through with a hydrophilic primer, a monomer. We applied that, we air dried that, and then we went with a hydrophobic resin, three-part systems. That's the fourth generation. Examples of that would be Scotch Bond Multipurpose Plus, Syntac, Allbond 2, Optibond FL. Then it's kind of interesting. I had this conversation again with one of the manufacturers this last weekend, that literally the conversations the manufacturers had were, these dentists are freaking idiots. I mean, they can't figure out, if we give them 3 bottles and they're labeled number 1, number 2, number 3, they can't figure out the number 2 is supposed to go after number 1 and before number 3. And they were having all these problems. And so manufacturers said, let's make it easier on these folks. Let's come up with a 5th generation, which still is an acid etch system because acid etch works. 5th generation, we etched with phosphoric acid, we rinsed, we left it moist, and we followed through with a single bottle that was hydrophobic and hydrophobic. And, examples of that, we Prime Bond NT, Optibond Solo Plus, One Step, Excite, the list goes on and on and on. Well, sensitivity was becoming an issue because us as dentists, we used a rubber dam in dental school. And if we got a little bit of saliva underneath an amalgam, we just rinsed and put the amalgam in, no big deal. We had Copalite, for God's sakes. That saved everything, according to our instructor. And then we got out of school. We didn't use the rubber dam because that was like, getting out of jail for us, that we didn't have to put the rubber dam on. And then we etched the dentin. We exposed the odontoblastic processes, which is a live vital organ. And then we let the saliva with all the bacteria roll over the prep. We sealed it in, and then we wondered why we had sensitivity. And so the manufacturers were getting calls every single day, multiple times a day, about your product causes sensitivity. So the manufacturer said, you know what, I don't think these dentists are smart enough to be able to open up the dental tubule. So let's give them something that just modifies the smear layer. Actually doesn't etch the dentin, but modifies. And that's where the self-etching primers came in. And the saving grace for us was sensitivity went from a lot to 0.
And give name brands of those.
Well, you got Clearfill, SE Bond. Again, the list goes. Adhesives from Ivoclar. You've got Prelude from Danville Engineering. There's a zillion on the market, and some of them are good. You got Simplicity from Apex. I think they were a good alternative for dentists that didn't want to isolate properly. I think it was a compromise. The long-term bonds to enamel was very questionable. The bonds to dentin, when you had garbage on your dentin, whether it be oil from your handpiece, some temporary cement, some pellicle layer, those are all going to be incorporated into your restoration. I think that's a compromise, but at least we didn't see sensitivity. They were 2-bottle systems, so you actually had some sort of phosphoric ester or a mild acid. You rubbed it on the dentin and enamel. It did modify the smear layer. It kind of etched enamel. You air dried that and you followed through with a hydrophobic resin. You light cured that and you restored. Well, then the manufacturers, and this is where I think that they kind of got greedy, and this is where I think they got a little misleading. They said, wow, my God, all of a sudden there's no sensitivity. We're selling a bunch of the 6th generation adhesive, the self-etchers. But it's 2 bottles. What if we made it 1 bottle think about how much we'd sell. So they came up with the 7th generation adhesives, and iBond, Gbond, Xeno, and again the list goes on and on. They were single bottle systems, self-etch primers, where you had a hydrophilic component and a hydrophobic component. You had acid and you had water in the same bottle, which I think is a problem. And I think these are adhesives that are going to cause a huge problem in the future, because studies, and Franklin Tay has described most of this, where he talks about the hydrophilicity, where even though you apply that and you air dry it and you light cure, you create a hydrophilic layer where it's almost like a screen door. We're actually getting pulpal fluids come through that hybrid layer because of its permeability. So I think those are not the way we should go, even though they're easy. And as a practicing dentist, I like ease of use, reduced cost, technique insensitivity. I like those things. But if they compromise performance, there's no way I'm going to go that route.
Now, is this what you're calling universal adhesives?
No, I haven't got there.
Oh, okay.
So that would be the seventh generation, self-etching, single bottle systems. Well, recently, about 3 years ago, a patent expired, and all of a sudden these universal adhesives, and they all contain a monomer called the MDP monomer, which is a monophosphate ion that is this very stable monomer that was actually based from Clearfill. The success why Clearfill, I think, is a good bonding agent because it had this monomer. And 3M, their universal bond came out first. Then we have Bisco's universal bond. Kerr has all-in-one bond. Ivoclar just introduced its Adhesives universal. These may be our saving grace, because as dentists, you're a practicing clinician, you're training your young dentists to come into your practice. You want ease of use. If I could give you one bottle, why not? And these new universal adhesives, I think they're going to be great adhesives. And I say that because as a clinician, I like the monomer. The people that invented it, and I'm a good friend with Byung-Soo, who owns Bisco. He thinks his product is awesome. And I think All-Bond 3 is probably the best bonding agent that's ever been since the 80s, since adhesion really started for us. He thinks this is as stable and as good as a bonding agent as All-Bond 3. So, these people that have developed this, they like the bonding. They think it's stable. As an educator, I have to be a little concerned with, I haven't seen long-term research. So I wouldn't say, Howard, throw away all your other bonding agents. Use this. I know it's going to work, because 3 years from now, I don't know. I think it's going to be, but
okay, David. When we do these podcasts, and they're downloaded from iTunes from every country on earth immediately. So for all of us dentists out there who don't even want to fill up our brain with everything you know about this adhesive stuff, and there's bleeding edge and stuff coming, and tell us how you adhesively bond a direct composite today, and how do you cement of all porcelain crown today? Walk us through and give us brand names so we don't have to, instead of a multiple choice deal. How would you do it?
Okay. Let me just say one thing before I go there. What I'm saying now when people say, what bonding agent should I use? I always ask them what they're using now. For those that are using 4th generation adhesives, those are 3-part systems. I would say stay with it. That's still the best. I can show you 25-year clinicals. I'm getting to the point in my practice that I'm replacing stuff now that I placed 25 years ago. And I'm cutting it off, and it's like bad enamel. Even on cementum, bad enamel. Why? Because I use the 4th generation. I still think they're the best. So if you're using a 4th generation, I would say stick with it.
And give names for those again.
My favorite bonding agent is All-Bond 3. It's an alcohol base. It's a self-cure as well as a light cure. It's a really great system that's got chemistry dating back to 1988. The second one would be Optibond FL. Again, chemistry from the late 80s that we can see, has long-term stability, and it's just a really great system. But they're technique sensitive because it's 3 parts. Those would be my 2 choices. If you said, what do I think are the best? I would say Optibond FL and All-Bond 3. That would be my recommendation. But they're more technique sensitive.
Okay, can I stop you on the technique sensitive?
Yeah.
Or do you want to finish that? Well, I was just going to say,
let me just finish
that, then I'm going to come back to the technique sensitive.
If you said you were using a 5th, 6th, or 7th, so that would be the single bottle total etch systems, a self-etch or a single bottle self-etch, I would tell you to go to the new universals. I think the fourth generation are best. Fifth, sixth, and seventh should really disappear, in my opinion. And the eighth generations are really nice because you can use it as a self etch. You can use it as a select etch, which means you can etch the enamel only, which I think we should be anyway. Or you can use it as a total etch. Now, I use them as a total etch, but you have that opportunity to modify your technique, not based on the material. The material will do it all.
And name your favorite universals.
The two that I like, and again, they haven't been out long enough to really give long-term data. I like Universal Bond from Bisco. I think Byung-Soo is just head of the game on adhesive agents. The new Adhesives Universal from Ivoclar, they've done their homework. I wasn't a fan of Adhesives Universal. They put another monomer in there. It looks very stable, looks very promising. And I think, 3M Scotch Bond Universal is the Reliax Universal is an excellent system. I think you could not go wrong with any of those three.
Well, is it also, humans always use heuristics. We have too many decisions to make, so we go to heuristics. Like if you walk into Target and you see two blenders and one's $20 and one's $40, you just assume the one that's $40 is twice your night. Prices are usually efficient. It seems like I use a lot of heuristics just with companies. There just seems to be a lot of companies that, if you buy a product from Ivoclar or 3M or Bisco, you're not going to get burned. Would you say there's just companies that you can just trust? Like Tide and just big brand names like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's what I call the big 5 or 6, and those are the companies that are actually doing all the R&D on the product that they manufacture.
And
so
who would you say that big 5 or 6 is?
Yeah, I would say Ultradent, Bisco, 3M, Ivoclar, Kerr, Voco is and Pulpden are doing some very cool things. I just wouldn't put them in the same category, and I may insult some people by that they didn't get included, but those would be my big 5.
Ultradent, Dan Fisher, 3M, Bisco, Byung-Soo, Ivoclar, Bob Ganley, Kerr. I remember those back in the day.
Yeah, Damien McDonald is the head of Kerr now. Kerr Dental.
Yeah.
They're doing the R&D and they're making it on site. As they make chemistry changes, it's because their scientists that work for them are doing the research and are doing the fabrication. It's not, not a company. I'm not going to name some of these companies. It's one here in California where, they'll just look for kind of an idea and they'll go around and find out who can kind of make that for them and who can give them the best price. And they put it in a fancy bottle and they create an ad with some pretty people on it and they think they're making us think that they're making it. Well, they're not making it.
I want to drop 2 little stories. My sister is in a nunnery in Lake Elmo. So when I go visit her to make it a business expense, I fly to Minnesota. I got to do business for 4 hours, 1 minute. So I usually always go to 3M. And I go in there from 8 to 12:01. And they just, I don't know how many PhDs are walking around in lab coats. But there was remember that little Indian girl? She couldn't have been 5 foot tall. Samitra, or do you remember her name? And you would ask her just a simple question at 3M, and she would take you to a grease board until your eyes just rolled back in your head and fell off. Yeah. And another one was Ivoclar. I'll never forget. I was in Liechtenstein, and I went and saw their headquarters, and you went and talked to their PhD people. These people are just at a different level. And when I agree with that list of big 5: Ultradent, 3M, Bisco, Ivoclar, Kerr. They sell it. I'm sure it works. I got more things to worry about than if 3M didn't do their homework. You know what I mean? And
I totally agree. So I think I'm
going to go back to something you said, and I want to go through this because I had sensitivity when I started doing the Cosmetic Revolution. I was always asking you about that, and I remember you used to write a list of top 10 things to stop sensitivity. So David, so you're doing these, you're doing a direct. Do you use a laser to make sure there's no tissue around the margins for oozing? Any tricks or rubber dam, or talk about proper isolation so that you do get a good bond. And remember back in the day, like sometimes you'd wash stuff off with tubeless red and other cleaning agents. There's a lot of kids today that I see that, you know, before they do every bonding agent, they go through a religious deal of Paradex and chlorhexidine gluconate, and they're putting all these chemicals on there. Then other dentists are saying, well, you know, do you know if that bonding agent's been tested on a tooth that's been washed with chlorhexidine gluconate, which is an oil or whatever? So go through your actual, if technique sensitivity is an issue, go through your technique of how you isolate and clean that prep.
Okay. Well, you know, I don't pack cord. You know, I haven't packed cord now in probably 10 years. I'm a huge laser user, diode lasers, you know, and if you want to talk about product, you know, I'm going to push Alan Miller, I think AMD with their Picasso and Picasso Light. You know, Alan's goal was to create an affordable laser that every dentist in the world could afford. And, you know, up until the time he brought the Picasso, you know, a laser was $29,000, which is a lot of money. And then it became 17. And then if it dropped down to 12, we thought we were in heaven. And all of a sudden, Alan came and said, listen, here's a laser for under $5,000 that works, has disposable tips, touch screen. And so when dentists ask me if they were to buy a laser, I would recommend the Picasso Light.
Isn't he up the street
from
from me now?
AMD.
Isn't he in San Diego now?
No, he's actually up in Laguna Niguel.
Is that close to you in San Diego?
Yeah, it's an hour and 15
okay.
minutes. So close enough that I actually am going to see him. We're going to a Halloween party together on Friday night.
Tell him I said hi. He's my idol.
Absolutely, I will. You know, he's just done some really cool thing. And a lot of people don't know that was his company that he started.
Right.
And he sold it to Dentsply, and he just bought it back because Dentsply wasn't taking that control of, you know, personality, you know, because it's a relationship-based company. And so he just got that back. And so things are going to change and actually become better.
Will you tell him at the Halloween party to do this podcast with me? Tell him how to do it, because I want to talk lasers. Because
yes. Yeah,
because
absolutely.
You're right.
He's the man.
Do you remember when we got out of school, the going laser was it an ADM laser? It was $50,000. You remember that?
The first one I bought was $49,000, and now it sits in a closet.
Yeah.
I can't get parts for it. It doesn't work. And I'm like every other dentist. I refuse to throw things away, even if they don't work.
So
it's sitting in the closet.
When you do a DO or you do a prep and there's any tissue deals, you're taking the ADM and AMD. You're taking the AMD laser. I have it too. Tell them how do you use that? I mean, are you just troughing around the whole?
Yeah. No, I would do it wherever I think that there's a gingival concern, whether it be tissue that's inflamed, whether tissues, you know, take out an old amalgam and, you know, the tissue now all of a sudden pops over the base of that, you know, the floor of that box. You know, just take the laser and create a trough. I don't have to go all the way around the tooth, but if I think that's going to be a concern, I mean, it's so easy. The other nice thing about the diode, and that's what we're talking about, it actually has unbelievable hemostatic properties. In fact, the more blood, the better it works because it's attracted to hemoglobin. So I would take it very low energy, about 1 watt, and just create a little trough. There's no postoperative sensitivity. That's how I would deal with that. The other thing I like.
Does your hygienist use it?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I personally think that the use of a laser is standard of care in periodontal treatment. Okay. I mean, the data's there. And it's unfortunate that there's so many states across the country that their hygienists cannot use a laser because it'll never be incorporated into just periodontal therapy. My hygienist uses it on 100% of the patients she sees. And it could be a single pocket. The other thing, and I know we're getting off track a little bit here, but it's the beauty of these, is laser bacterial reduction. I mean, think about you as a dentist. New patient comes in. You decide that you're going to be a comprehensive dentist, so you're going to probe. Patient hasn't been to a dentist in 10 years, so you're probing 2, 3, 4 with bleeding, 7 with pus, 2 in healthy, 3 in healthy, 4 with pus. I mean, you're moving that infection around the mouth, right? You don't take that periodontal probe and get a new one and sterilize it. You're just moving it around the mouth. And the hygienist is doing the same thing with scalers, whether it be ultrasonic or hand scalers. So what studies have shown is the hygienist can put a very low wattage, just go around every tooth. Takes my hygienist about 3 minutes, called LBR, laser bacterial reduction. Goes around every tooth, cuts down, and again, the studies are there, cuts down the concentration of bacteria because it's bactericidal. Then she can go in and she can start doing her normal scaling and root planing or just cleaning. So, yes, my hygienist uses it.
Can I make one comment on what you just said? You know how you're saying the probe is moving bacteria around? What just fries me is these dentists will see a woman every 3 months on perio recall, and her husband hasn't seen the dentist in 5 years, and she's making out with him every night in bed. And I'm like, if you were treating this woman for gonorrhea, syphilis, and chlamydia, would it ever dawn on you to bring in her husband and treat them both? And I see the research on you can't treat one party for STDs or gum disease or decay while they're making out with someone that has, it's got a tartar bridge. But anyway, I'm sorry, we're so off track.
Yeah,
let's go. Let's go back. Let's go back to isolation.
I'm gonna take 5 seconds. I got to plug in my computer.
Okay.
Otherwise, you're gonna lose me in the middle of this. All right. So let's go back to the bonding. You can still hear me?
Yes. Perfect.
Okay. So again, I'm a total etcher, and there's nothing that I've seen yesterday, today, or I don't think tomorrow that's going to make me a self-etcher. I just don't believe in that. I think if people say they're having sensitivity with total etch, they should review their technique. Don't blame the system. So if I was to do a direct composite, first isolation, whether it be a laser, whether it be cord for those that don't have a laser, or I'm a huge proponent of these KLN putty materials like Expasil. I like Centrix. It's called Access Edge because it'll fit in a regular CR syringe, and it's a aluminum chloride with it's a kaolin putty. So some people have seen it. You inject it in the sulcus, it actually expands, pushes back the tissue, and we use it before we cement any restoration because it just eliminates any sulcular fluids or any of the problem with that with micro leakage. So I would either use something like that. Access Edge from Centrix is my favorite, or the laser, or cord for those that still utilize that. I total etch, so I would total etch. I think if someone wants to take a Concepsus or some kind of chlorhexidine ahead of time, I have no problem with that. I don't think it's mandatory. But if we know there's a direct correlation between bacteria on the surface and degree of pulpitis, why not kill as much bacteria as possible? I think the etch is doing that. And then I'm using a re-wetting agent that's antibacterial. So I would etch the enamel followed by the dentin. Typically, I'll etch the dentin for 10 to 15 seconds. Rinse. Lightly air dry, but don't desiccate. Then I do follow through with a re-wetting agent. You kind of alluded to these about, that's where Tubulacid Red and Super Seal and Gluma and all these products came out of the woodwork. I use that as an antibacterial. Plus, I think it eliminates what I call immediate reversible pulpitis. I'm a huge fan of a hemo water glutaraldehyde solution, and the original one was Gluma. Again, that was a patent that expired, so now we got a zillion others. We got Telio desensitizer, Danville Engineering, Ray Bertolotti's group. They've got Microprime G. Some people say, I use Microprime. If it's the original one, that's actually benzalkonium chloride. Ray today would tell you to use Microprime G. So any of the Gluma or the glutaraldehyde hemo water solutions, place it on the dentin, let it sit for 10 to 15 seconds, blot dry the excess. In my practice, I would use Albond 3. That's my go-to. So I would put the primer on, primer 15 to 20 seconds, air dry. That has a photo initiator. I would light cure that. Then I would put the second component, which is actually the third component, etch, primer, and then the resin. Place the resin, thin coat, air thin it, light cure it, and then I would build up my composite.
Now, are you putting flowables in the boxes and then composite, or talk about that?
I do not, because I'm a sonic fill user. That's a product from Kerr, and the handpiece is Cavo. Kerr is now under this big umbrella called Danaher, largest dental company in the world. And I like that system. It was developed by Alka Bashigawa and Ron Jackson. And for those that haven't seen it, it's a composite that is the stiffest, most condensable, carvable composite on the market. But you could never get it through a syringe tip unless you change the viscosity. And by introducing it to sonic energy through a handpiece, then it basically takes this really stiff composite and makes it a flowable.
I love that thing.
I love that product too.
Yeah.
So, it's $1,000 investment, but you get $1,000 worth of product. And so, to me, it's almost like buying a cell phone. They give it away because they want you to buy the minutes, right? So I would use sonic fill, so I don't use a flowable. For those that do not use sonic fill, sonic fill as it comes out of the cannula tip or the compule, it's like a flowable. For those that are not using the sonic fill, I do recommend placing a flowable, just lining the dentin kind of as a wetting agent, as a buffer, light cure that, and then either use a traditional composite in increments of 2 millimeters or less, or use one of the new bulk fills in probably 4 millimeters or less. And, the new bulk fills are, they're very promising. Ivoclar just came out with one. 3M just came out with one. We have SureFill that's been on the market for about 3 years now. Horace Colzer just came out with Venus bulk fill. I mean, there's some great products. And what's
is
made
the
these
marketing
products
is the
different.
marketing term bulk fill just so that you can place 4 millimeters at a time instead of two? You place it in bulk.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
how does this work chemistry wise? I mean, how does that work? Because when
What
you light cure
what
it, the
they
light goes deeper, or
No, yeah, two things that happens. One is they've made them very translucent, and the filler particle will allow the absorption of light and a greater degree of light. So that's one reason. That's why a lot of people would say, yeah, they don't look as good. They tend to look kind of gray and kind of translucent. Yeah, they do. They're not as aesthetic as you're going to build up this dentin and enamel and these cool layers. So that's one of the reasons. The second is that they change the polymerization shrinkage. Most composites traditionally, like Herculite and Evoceram and things we've used forever, Filtech Supreme, they shrink typically anywhere between 3 and 7% by volume, which is a lot. The new bulk fill composites only shrink 1.5 to 2%. That doesn't sound like a lot of difference. It's huge. And so now we're not seeing the polymerization shrinkage overcome our dentinal bond. We're not seeing cuspal deflection. Again, the studies are there. And in my own practice, I know this is anecdotal, but certainly in the last 3 years that I've been utilizing bulk fill, I don't all of a sudden say, oh, wow, I'm getting sensitivity all of a sudden. It's a totally different composite than we were using in the past. That's how we can get away with it. So that's how I would do a direct composite. Now, to cement a restoration, and everything's the same. I'm a keep it simple thinker. If I was to do veneers, same thing. I'm going to etch, I'm going to rinse, lightly air dry, apply my All Bond 3, air dry, light cure, or I'm sorry, apply my desensitizer, my glutaraldine hemo water solution desensitizer, blot that dry, put my primer, air dry that, light cure it, put my unfilled resin, and then I would use a light cure only cement. I think the manufacturers have kind of answered our needs, and they've created what I call a site-specific or restoration-specific cement, where for the anterior, it's light cure only. It has high fluorescence, high luminescence, maybe low radial opacity because I don't need it. But it's very, very color stable, has no tertiary amines, so it's not going to change with time. Has a very accurate water-soluble try-in gel that we can use to try these restorations in. So for veneers and crowns, I use a light cure only cement. My favorite, because you're asking me for product, I like Verilink veneer. Not Verilink 2, not Verilink, Verilink veneer from Ivoclar. Reliax veneer cement, I like real well. NX3 from Kerr, I like. So those would be my favorite. So that would be anterior veneers and crowns. In the posterior, now we've got a restoration that may be 6 or 7 millimeters thick, or maybe there's a box of an onlay that's 10 millimeters deep. Everything's the same. As I get up to the cement, I'm going to etch, I'm going to apply my desensitizer, I'm going to place my primer, my unfilled resin. Now I'm going to choose a dual cure resin cement, something that'll cure in a dark environment. And my two favorite, Bisco's Dual Link Universal is my favorite. Easy to clean up, great chemistry. And I like NX3 from Kerr. Easy to clean up, great chemistry. Those would be my two favorite. And really that covers all my bonded restorations.
well, David, I just want to say that was probably the fastest hour of a podcast I've ever done. But I want to tell the listeners out there, because from here to Kathmandu, that I'll make a comparison to the cosmetic lectures versus the orthodontic lectures. There's a lot of people who teach orthodontics to general dentists, and I've measured them for years, and most of them, at least half the classes, after they've gone through this $4,000 or $5,000 curriculum, they say, I'm not smart enough to do ortho, and I'm not going to do it. And then some teachers just have a gift of teaching, and everybody bonds up and starts a class 1 ortho case. And I want to say that I've been watching people teach cosmetics for 25, 26, 27 years. And it's not just my opinion, but most of the people in CE say that you are the most naturally gifted teacher, whether it's live, hands-on, at the deal. There's no matter what level the student is, what question they ask, man, you just get it into their head. You are just the most natural, gifted teacher in all of dentistry. And if you're thinking about getting into this and taking your cosmetics to the next level, run to an airplane and fly out there to Irvine or David. Go to davidhornbeckgroup.com. And David,
Yeah,
I just want
it's
to,
David Horn. First of all,
davidhornbeck.com.
first of all, I want to thank you for saying that. I don't think that's necessarily true. And, you know, I've worked very hard, and people say, "Oh, you're famous," and it's like I've worked hard, and I've worked hard because I love what I do. I'm very passionate. I mean, you can tell I could go another hour easily.
Oh,
I mean, I
yeah.
love what I do, and I try to transfer that to my students. Um, if people are interested in because I still travel a lot, I still do my all-day lectures where I cover mostly ceramics, smile design, lasers, just about everything. They can actually go to davidhornbrook.com, go to the calendar, and they can find where I am, and it'll tell you where I'm in, and you can either go by area, East Coast, and you can find where I am. And also, I do have a lot of handouts available that are free. They can go to my website, they go up to lectures, click on the button, a drop-down menu that says David's Handouts. They click on that, and all they do is put in their email address, and they can download a PDF of multiple handouts of step-by-step or cementation or ceramics. So, yeah, because I consider myself a mentor, and I want to transfer that. I want to be accessible to people. I want to make sure people know that I'm here for them, because overall dentistry is just going to get better if people are doing things right and exploring what we can offer our patients now.
Well, David, thank you for all that you do for dentistry. Thank you for all that you've done for Dental Town. And man, thanks for a great hour. Thank you very much, David.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. Thanks for all the kind words, Howard.